Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to the 2019 Syntergy webinar series. Today's webinar topic is your OpenText Content Server data is at risk. This webinar is being recorded so that we can distribute the slide deck and the webinar recording after this event. If you've registered, you'll be getting one of these links to download the webinar. The topic we want to really discuss is, as you know, that motivations behind data theft involve financial gain, personal data exposure, and intellectual property theft. Detecting strange and unusual activity in content server is one of the biggest concerns for organizations. My name is Vijay Sharma. I'm the VP of Sales and Business Development. Sorry. I'm sorry, let me see. My screen's paused here. I'll get this started again. Okay, there we go. As I was saying, my name is Vijay Sharma. I'm the VP of Sales and Business Development. Joining me on this webinar will be Ivan Gudov, who's one of our solution specialists, and he'll be also demonstrating the solution Content Sentry. And Robbie Spencer, who's our product manager for our data loss protection solutions, and he'll be talking a little bit about our roadmap in the future in terms of what we're doing in this space at the end of this presentation as well. Some of the sort of thought-provoking questions on the right-hand side of this slide are what customers are asking themselves internally, as well as sharing with us as to what they're looking for. And I'm sure you've probably got more questions, and feel free to share with those. If you have any questions during this webinar, there is a chat window on your bottom of your screen in the GoToMeeting. You can enter your question there, and one of our team members will respond as we go along, or otherwise we will gather those questions if they're still outstanding and kind of have a Q&A at the end as well. So let's get started. The agenda for today is for those of you who don't know anything about Syntergy, we're going to talk a little bit about just a 50,000-foot view of the Syntergy, as Syntergy as a corporation. We're then going to be, we'll talk a little bit more about why implement a data loss prevention strategy. Customers do ask us that, why do I need to do this? And these are just some of the things that we learn from the industry, and we want to share with you. And then we'll also share some data points regarding impacts of data breach, right? After that introduction, we will Ivan Gudov will share his screen, and then we'll do a short demonstration of our Content Sentry solution. We'll show you how to really, we'll simulate how, to monitor anomalous activity, unusual activity in your content server. And then, we'll show you some custom dashboards, etc. And then Robbie Spencer will be sharing a few bullets on our future roadmap in this area as well. Syntergy has been in the OpenText ecosystem for 23 years, and we're headquartered in San Diego, California. Staff's distributed throughout North America, and we work through partners in Europe and Asia. We're an official OpenText technology partner, meaning that we offer solutions for the OpenText Content Suite Platform. We have over 20 plus solutions in this space, and really our mission is really to, you made a significant investment in your Content Suite Platform, and our mission is really to enhance the use and performance of use performance and security of your OpenText ECM software. In addition to the 20 plus solutions we provide, we do offer consulting services around upgrades, migrations, custom module development, if you need any assistance in performance tuning, etc. One of the key differentiators for Syntergy in this space is really, we do get asked, what are your differentiators as an OpenText technology partner? I'd like to kind of point out that we have the technical expertise, we're responsive, and provide value for the solutions we provide in the marketplace. The focus today is going to be the one I've highlighted in red in terms of our popular technology solutions, which is the data-centric data loss prevention solution. But some of the popular ones, other popular technology solutions that our customers do utilize extensively are listed here. I won't go into all of them, but just to highlight a few. We do offer a zero downtime one-up upgrade solution to Content Server 16. So if you've got a legacy platform, whether it's an old LiveLink system or Content Server 10.0, etc., we do offer a unique solutions in that space. A lot of our customers have multiple Content Server LiveLink instances. They want to take the opportunity to consolidate. We do offer solutions in that space as well. We have a unique solution in the DR space as well called Always On Content Servers. So this gives you the capability to have a live DR solution that you could always log into or switch over to in case of a planned outage or unplanned outage, as well as powerful bulk data loading solutions and meta management solutions. Some of the new things we're doing. We now have the capabilities to synchronize content from your Content Suite platform to other major cloud services such as Box, OneDrive, Microsoft Office 365, Google, Dropbox, etc. This is some of the new things that we're doing. So the question comes up, what is data loss prevention, and why do I need to implement this? And really, there is a long list of reasons why, what is data loss prevention? And, from our perspective, and especially from the Content Suite perspective, it really is a strategy to assist system / network administrators and security teams to control what data end users can access and transfer. One of the key things that we do get asked about is how can I detect anomalous or unusual activity, nefarious user activity. There could be a disgruntled employee who decides to take the data. How can I identify that? Also, our customers are asking is that we do have a lot of sensitive data that resides in Content Server. How do I identify where does this data reside? Okay, so those are some of the key questions. And how can I control what data users can view and transfer, without accidentally or maliciously sharing that data? How can I control that? Just a quick visual here from this organization. We'll share this slide so you'll have the link and you can kind of go to this website. Interesting, this company is called Information is Beautiful. They're experts in transforming large data sets into visuals that we can have some meaning to. This is I just took a screenshot of their latest from their website. In terms of world's biggest data breaches, 30,000 records and up. This was last updated on April 1, 2019, and you can see that this is kind of alarming, right? So there's a lot of therefore various reasons data breaches do occur, and whether it's an external threat or an insider threat, and we'll talk a little bit about that as well. But I think this will be a useful website to, when we share the slide, that you'll be able to click on that link and go to the website to kind of dig in a little bit more on that. The The impact of data breaches, what I wanted to share with you was that some data points from Ponemon, the Ponemon Institute organization. Ponemon, if you don't know who Ponemon Institute is, they conduct independent research on data protection. And the last report one of the first ones they published was in 2016, and the latest one they just released was in August 26, 2018. And some of the key data points from this report are that it was kind of interesting. I just took some summaries from it, but we'll send you. You'll have a link, or you can search for this, and you'll find it on the web. The summary, I just pulled out some of the bullets, and it's kind of interesting data to kind of consider. That data breaches are caused by insiders, and it's increasing in frequency and cost. A lot of the data breaches, they're indicating that companies need to intensify their efforts to minimize the insider risk because of the rising costs. The latest study, they interviewed 717 IT and security practitioners in 159 organizations worldwide, and really, while the root cause, the root cause of the data breaches were, typically is a bad actor who steals employee credentials, is responsible for most of the costly incidents. According to the research, if the incident involved a negligent employee or contractor, companies spent an average of $283,000. The average cost more than doubles if the incident involved an imposter or a thief who steals credentials, which is approximately $648,000. And hackers cost the organizations representing this research an average of $600,000 per incident. So the Ponemon Institute concluded that companies need to intensify their efforts to minimize the insider risk because of rising costs of frequency of incidents. And really the other sort of impact to consider, which I've got at the bottom of this slide, is the damage to your company brand, reputation, revenue loss. There's always secondary issues with this, resignations and job losses, and as it indicates, nearly 70% of breaches impact a secondary victim. Okay. The other sort of research data we're seeing is that the majority of the spending by organization today is to prevent external threats. So you've got fortified firewalls, you've got all the latest and greatest security software to protect you from the outsider threat. However, there's very little being done with the insider in the organization. And the impact of the insider threat, although less frequent, as Ponemon Institute indicated, are more damaging, right? So really what we're saying is that businesses need to reevaluate the risk, align your resources appropriately. There are, we're also seeing, including some of the agreements we do with our clients, the clients and partners are now demanding proof of an implementation of a data loss prevention solution. So, if I share my confidential data with you as organization ABC, how are you going to protect my data, right? Before we do have a partnership or do business together. So we're seeing some of that as well. Some of the statistics to share with you, 67% of IT pros are concerned about insider threats, but the majority of the security spending doesn't address them. This is from the InfoSecurity group. 71% of employees have access to data they should not have or not see. This is from MarketWired. 88% of insider threat actions were from privileged abuse. 18% unimproved hardware. This is from the data breach investigations report. and 71% of the insider threats were done via the LAN, so meaning in the office on your internal network. Again, this is from the data breach investigations report. So kind of interesting statistics and something to think about. So finally, before we jump into the demo, just a couple more things to share with you. The customers, do come to us and we do talk about some of these areas. Really the challenges of protecting your content server data. One of the biggest things customers do ask us is that how do I guard against what I'd like to call the Edward Snowden conundrum, right? Meaning I had access to all this sensitive data. I decided to download it, take it with me, burn it on a thumb drive, and then take it outside the organization for gain, right? So that's kind of the major one. The other one we do get asked about is that how do I the other one I do get asked about is how do we know where our sensitive data is located? Most organizations do file their content diligently in libraries. They secure it with permissions, but there's always issues about what if the data gets moved, and what how do I know? I really want to know how to have a dashboard of where my data is residing, right? You've already a lot of customers also talk to us about that we do have a policies and procedures in terms of implementations of our security, but our concerns is in a true audit, do we have all the pieces that we need, right? So these are some of the areas, and some of the other concerns are that the users, it's a changing workforce. There's new apps. There's people are using a lot of mobile platforms. Users are bringing their own devices. Users are going around IT to get their jobs done sometimes. I like to call it shadow IT. So, those are some of the issues, and weak password management practices. So with Syntergy, our focus in this area, and we're going to show you the solution, Ivan's going to share that with you shortly, is in two areas, right? So today what we're shipping is what I like to call primarily in the anomaly detection area. And really the goal here is to drill down into every deviation from your normal user behavior, monitor that, and alert your info security teams and administrators as to what's going on. We want to take a closer look at privileged accounts to identify illicit activity, and then also we want to provide you the capability to notify about critical changes, suspicion logon activity, unusual failed actions, etc., and provide you with visible, clear, intuitive, customized dashboards as well, so you can keep an eye on what's going on with your content suite platform or content server. The second piece to this is that we'll be releasing later on this summer is the idea of getting deeper insights into what content you have in content server. So for example, I want to proactively monitor and secure sensitive data, which could be your personal information, it could be credit card information, it could be custom DoD or DoD mandates, it could be custom to your organization. How do I get a dashboard of what's in my content server, and so that I know it's in a secure location? So that's coming as a second SKU for this Content Sentry platform. So I think at this point in time, what I wanted to do was to hand over to Ivan, who's going to share his desktop, and then we can, he's going to do is give us a short demonstration of what we're offering today, and then we'll go back to Robbie who's going to will show you what's on the roadmap in the future as well, a little bit of details in the future. Okay, Ivan, do you want to take that?
Thanks, Vijay. So I hope you guys can see my screen. Vijay, you can see my screen?
Yes, I can, yeah.
Okay, perfect. So I'm gonna jump right in. When you install Content Sentry, it's just like a standard module. The installation goes through the modules staging directory, sorry. Once it's installed, it gives you a new entry in your admin index with a few pages for configuration. There's a general settings page, which lets you configure the user groups that get access to either the monitoring portion of it or the configuration portion of the tool. By default, it's just admins, and you can also enable or disable the main agent for the tool. So that's the general settings screen. Then the configure monitoring screen is kind of the most important one in terms of configuration. And that one defines essentially what you want to monitor. Users do various things in the system, and this screen allows you to configure different activity types. So we'll go into that page here. It's possibly a little overwhelming to start, but I'm gonna try to digest this for you guys. So what is an activity? It's basically some event that happens in the system, which could be a document download, for example, or some user changing permissions, or doing a rename, or opening a document, moving it. All of those are events, and they're configured independently. So let's just work with a simple example like an open. So on the left here, you see a list of different activity types, and these are predefined when you install the tool, so you don't have to configure them yourself, although I will explain how to configure your own actions as well. So once you install the tool, you just have these actions configured in terms of what type of action in the system is being tracked, but you don't have the limits set. So I'm going to explain how the limits work here. So at the top, we have the event settings, and you can either you can do enable monitoring as well as enable limits. So what enable monitoring does, it will actually count the number of times an activity has been performed by a specific user. So it counts each individual user, and it counts their open actions in this case, and keeps track of them. So this is what the enable monitoring checkbox does. And then the enable limits box actually checks those counts against the limits we set up in these two sections here. And I'll explain the difference in these sections next. So the default daily limit section is the one we configure for all users in the systems that we don't really have information about. So we don't know what this user does on a daily basis. We don't know how often that user opens a document. So these settings will apply across the board to all users while we don't have enough information for them. So the system actually collects data, and after 5 days of usage, we're able to calculate the average usage for that activity type for that specific user. And that's when we'll jump into the personal daily limits. So for the default ones, you basically just define low, medium, and high thresholds. So here I have a low set to 10. So that means when someone does 10 opens in a specific day, or opens 10 documents in a specific day, that would breach the low threshold, and that would be recorded in the system as a breach, essentially. And then you set this medium to be a higher number, high as well needs to be higher. And when each of these limits gets breached, you have a choice of some actions to be done when that happens. So one action we have here is the disable user. So if this activity that they're performing is a risky activity and you want them to not be able to do it once they've reached the limit, you just check this checkbox and the user will be disabled, and you'll have to re-enable the user manually in order for them to continue using the system. When that breach happens, you can also send a notification to a content server user by choosing this icon over here, or a specific email address. So it can be like a group distribution email that gets sent to a bunch of people. So that's what happens when the limits breach. And so these actions will grow with time. Currently, at this stage of the product, these are the actions we have. So once we've accumulated over 5 days of usage for a user and we're able to figure out their average, we can actually start using a more advanced personalized method to determine users' limits on what they're in terms of what activity they're doing in the system. So some user may be doing 1,000 opens every day, and that's normal for him. Another user can be doing 5 opens every day, and then doing 20 opens on a given day should not should raise an alarm essentially. So in some cases, having the default daily limits does not apply, and a certain user can be breaching these limits every day. That's why we have to jump to the personalized ones, and these ones use a standard deviation. So, which means basically on the low limit here, I have a standard deviation set to 3, meaning whenever the user gets 3 standard deviations higher than his average, that would cause a low threshold. Same idea with the medium. If it's 5 standard deviations off the average, then it'll cause a medium breach, and same with the high. And similar actions can be performed for each one of these breaches. Now, further down here, we have the advanced section. And so this section actually defines how the activity is tracked in the system, or like what triggers this activity to be tracked. So there's actually several ways that we think an open activity is done in the system. So we're using request handlers in this case to track this activity. So LL browse is one of the more popular request handlers that constitutes an open activity. LL overview is another one, LL properties, and so on. So there's a bunch, and all of these ones that we have configured here by default are using request handlers. However, if you have something in the system that is not tracked by this activity type, and you still consider that to be an open activity, it requires a little bit of a content server know-how, but essentially you can add an additional source type in here by clicking add source, and then you can pick whether you want to use a request handler to trigger this activity type, or an audit event, or node, or user callback. And then once you select that item, you can actually start typing in the value field, and it'll search through your system and it'll give you what's available in your specific system. So this is custom to you. So let's say I start typing open, and it gives me anything that's kind of related to open as far as the system knows, and a few things come up. One of them is fetch, which is when a version is opened, but possibly a good one to add to this list. There's also a classification opened audit event that we can use potentially for this. So you get some flexibility here, and because it gives you a list, you can kind of pick and choose on what you want to include. So I'm going to remove that. So that's that. You'll also notice that we have some tabs here, and these are essentially for the different risk profiles. And I'll explain a little later how to configure these. But essentially, these have different conditions in terms of what content is being touched, or if the content has a specific classification assigned to it, or if the user is an administrator user. So based on some of those criteria, you can actually have different limits set up for different types of scenarios. And I'll dig into that a little bit more. So one more thing I wanted to show you on the screen is actually how to create a new activity type. So a lot of our customers have custom modules set up in their systems that don't necessarily exist in other systems. So in some cases, you might want to create a custom activity type specific to that custom module that you have. So one example that I can demonstrate to you is using our Sentry module. So I actually have a bunch of these created already, so I'll create a new one, which was with kind of a useless name, but actually let's just do Sentry monitoring. Boom. So now we created a new activity type. We need to enable it. In order for it to be monitored, then we need to set some limits. I'm just going to set some arbitrary numbers here, 3, 5, and 7. And then when we get to the add source part, we can just start typing the name of the module. So I'll go Content Sentry, and here it shows me all the request handlers for Content Sentry. So I'm looking for the monitoring one, which would be my dashboard. So I know that my request handler to go to the monitoring piece to view all my information is this one. So I'll just pick that, and now every time someone goes to the dashboard, that's going to get recorded as an activity. But what if I wanted to track everything that's happening within this module, like every action that's ever done in Content Sentry? There's actually a fairly easy way to do that as well, and that's using wildcards. So I'll simply go type in the name of my module, type in dot, and then in the end add star. So now this will actually track anything that happens within Content Sentry. So that gives me kind of one activity type for an entire module, which is pretty flexible in my opinion. So I'm going to delete this event as it's not going to be really useful to me. So that's it on the screen. Let me go ahead further now. I'll skip the dashboard for a second, although it is very pretty. I'll just show you a little bit about these other types of profiles that we can track against. So sorry, actually, I'll start with the configure risk classification. So we call them risk classifications, and these are different from classifications that exist in a content server. The ones we have here are the default one exists by default, obviously, when you install this the module, but the three that I created on my own are called administrators, finance, and high. So administrators I created specifically to track what administrators do in the system. The finance one I created to track for activity in a specific folder within my system, specifically the finance folder. And the high classification, risk classification, is for documents that have a specific classification, RM classification assigned to them. So I want to know if those documents get activity, and I want to track it in a different way as well. So once you create these classifications, you also have to define the rules for them. And the way you define them is pretty straightforward. There's a list of conditions, so you can check whether it's in some personal workspace, if it's a specific user or user belongs in a specific group. You can tie it to a specific location or a category, as well as a category attribute value. You can tie it to a classification or an RM classification, as well as a hold. So once you pick one of these, you have to basically pick the specific value, whether it's a user or location or a category, and then you have to assign it to one of your risk classifications. So once you create that rule, you can prioritize this in this list, and as soon as the first rule that gets hit in this list, so it goes top to bottom, the first rule that gets matched, that's the classification that this activity type is going to be assigned to. So in this case, my RM classification rule is the first one. So if I touch a document that has this classification assigned, even if I'm an admin, this activity type is going to get recorded against the finance folder. But if I were to have this rule at the top and I was an admin going to access this document, I would get this activity tracked against the administrator's classification. I hope that didn't confuse you guys. So let me go back to admin home. And quickly, I'll pop back into configure monitoring just to kind of give you the full picture of the risk classification. So I have these three tabs that I described to you guys before, and each one of them has a different limit set for each one of these sections. And so that's how it'll be tracked. Let's go back now to the dashboard, the most fun piece. Sorry guys to keep showing you the boring text. So there's some color. This is the dashboard in a nutshell. On the left, we have some navigational pieces, so you can either view all activity in the system, or you can look at the activity by specific activity type, as well as you can look at your activity in the system by user, and I'll show that in a little more detail. Top right corner here, we have the date range selector. So right now I have the last 12 hours selected, but I can also go the last 2 hours. I can go today. I can go pretty far back. This is you can customize it pretty extensively for different date ranges. So I'll switch back to 12 hour. On the top here, we have 4 summary widgets. So the first one shows you how much activity in total was recorded over the last 12 hours. So that's 5,000 activity events. Out of those 5,000 events, 100 incidents were recorded, and they were done by 8 different users across 18 different event types. So this next section here actually shows us the incidents. So these are breaches of different limits. And so when I hover over here, it actually gives me some more information specifically on the time when this was recorded, how many different breaches we have. So we have 7 low breaches, 6 medium, and 3 high in the 9 a.m. to 10 a.m. slot. So this list is actually drill-inable. You can click on one of these bars and it'll expand the hour, and you can drill in further into the specific 5-minute slot, then into 1-minute slots, and so on. So that lets you kind of hone in specifically on a specific hour or specific time of day. Back to the 12 hours. So below that, we have a breakdown of all the incidents that happened in this time frame, along with the timestamp, the specific event type that this was, the user that this associates with, the severity of the breach, what classification was used. So I don't have much in terms of administrators and finance and high, but a couple here. Mostly default classification. Specifically, it shows you which condition was breached as well. So in this case, we breached the 30 count for the edit attributes activity type. So we got more than 30 there. Then it says which method was used. So baseline means it's the default daily limits, not the personalized ones with the standard deviation. And then action column here shows you whether a notification was sent or if the user was disabled. So in this case, the ones that are highlighted are the ones that actually had that action happen. Most of the things in the report are clickable, so I can actually click on the activity type or on the user, and it'll rejig the entire dashboard specifically to my selection. So once we go beyond the incidents, we have the event summary section, and that section kind of gives us the total activity on the system. So that's kind of an overview. And from a high level, you can kind of see when the most activity in the system happens. So this is a test system, so it's kind of fake data. Not exactly representative of a real system, but still something you can extract from a graph like that would be, for example, at 7 a.m. there was a huge jump in activity. So there was tons of activity, meaning people probably just got to work and started going in, downloading their documents that they're going to work on for the day and whatnot. So this potentially makes sense. But if this spike happened, at 1 a.m., for example, you'd wonder what the hell was going on, and that could be, merit or reason for you to do some research in that hour and figure out what the hell people were doing. So that's that. And then we have a couple of summary widgets here too, one called top events. So this shows us the most popular events for the date range that we have selected, open being the most popular with 2,500 almost activity rows. Then it shows you the most active users as well. So admin here is the most active with 1,700 different activities. And you also get the actual data preview here, also with a timestamp, event, user classification, specific function that was used to trigger this activity type, as well as the IP address and any object in the system that was associated with this activity, if any. So in some cases, it doesn't associate an object, like when you're going to the enterprise workspace, there is no specific object associated with that, so there's nothing listed there. So this list is paginated, and you can actually export it to a CSV if you want to process that data in some other way for reporting or whatnot. And we have some more information down below, just breaking down all of the users that had activity during this time frame, as well as all activity types that were touched during this time frame. Now, when you go into a specific activity type on this report, like this open activity, for example, that we've been talking about, this gives you the summary just for that activity across the same date range and for all users. So it's kind of a similar look, nothing extra new here, just kind of gives you an ability to look at open activity only. And a similar idea goes for users. So if I were to pick a specific user to look at, like this user 02, it gives us the same information, but only pertaining to this user. So that's all of that information for this user. But in addition to that, we get this profile tab that actually gives you a little more insight on what the user is doing specifically today. So there's the event mix graph that shows you each activity that this user is doing kind of side by side, and you can tell quickly that open activity is the most popular activity for this user. So he does a lot of opens. Next most popular activity for him is the move. You can actually look at it in different types of graphs for better presentation. So you get that graph, and then you also get his usage today versus his average. So you can see on this graph how his usage today compares to his average. So for example, today he had 843 opens, but his average is about 793. So he's a bit above his average. So that gives you a little more information. Then there's also the threshold section, which shows you how far along the threshold line the user is. So for the download, for example, activity, he's done 8 downloads today. This little blue arrow shows his mean. His mean is 8. Then down here it actually shows you the low limit, the medium limit, and the high limit. So we can clearly see that this user hasn't even gone close to the low limit. So he's got nothing to worry about in terms of the downloads. But for open, for example, with 843 opens, he's well beyond the high limit of 30. For rename, he breached his medium limit, but didn't go all the way to the high. So that gives you a little more insight there. And we also have some distribution histograms that don't fully make sense right now because we don't have personalized data for this user, meaning we don't have at least 5 days worth of usage. But once we have some more historical data, these start taking shapes, and you can also see how much activity happens on average for that user in different types of days, etc. That's pretty much everything I wanted to touch on for you guys. Robbie, VJ, anything else you guys wanted me to demonstrate?
No, Ivan, thank you. That was great. What I'm going to do now is to just kind of bring up this slide to kind of finish off. Robbie, do you want to just kind of talk a little bit about what's coming in the future in terms of the Content Sentry platform? Yeah.
Yes, absolutely, Vijay. So yeah, as Ivan demoed there, there's a lot of kind of neat information that you can pull from Content Sentry in terms of usage data and your monitoring profiles and all those sorts of things. The product has been on the market now for just over a year, and we just had a recent release actually a month ago. And the new release had a lot of the features where you can kind of do the classifications, the rules, and that sort of feature. So when we did our initial installations with customers, it was kind of a one-size-fits-all. So we were monitoring every event, and there was no sort of ability to say, well, this area of content server is a little bit more sensitive than other areas, and we want to monitor that differently. So that last release addressed that by allowing people to kind of create rules and classifications of their data, and we can monitor those differently. And on the product roadmap up next is the sensitive content detection, and Vijay alluded to that during his slide presentation. And the main objective of that feature is basically for users to see what's inside of your files. So it gives you some context around the sensitive data, so you can be proactive and you can identify and maybe lock down overexposed data and remediate security vulnerabilities instead of sort of waiting to be reactive and say, users access some sensitive information. Well, we got to first go find out where it is and locate it and so on. So just be a little bit more on the proactive side. So you'll have the ability to scan, the data that's at rest. So you can scan, particular folders, or ultimately you can scan the entire enterprise, and it'll identify, again, with the nice graphs and the charts that we have in the monitoring, and you can have a good visualization of the data in your system. And the other kind of main feature for that is, if you have a sensitive area of content server where you should not be uploading certain types of data, or vice versa, if you have a public area where you should not have any sensitive data, we'll be able to scan those documents as they're uploaded, and then it'll kind of reject them if they contain some sensitive information, whether it be financial or privacy information and so on. So that's the next main feature for Sentry. Some of the other things on the list there, I won't go through them all, we're getting low on time, but the other main thing we're hearing from customers is with a lot of the SIEM integration. So customers have these enterprise applications like Splunk, ArcSight, QRadar, and they provide great overview of the entire enterprise. And we have some very useful information in our database that we collect with Content Sentry. So we will be able to provide that to those enterprise level applications like Splunk, ArcSight, and QRadar. So with that, I think we'll kind of open it up, or I'll pass it back to VJ and we'll open it up for questions.
Yeah, you can, thank you, Robbie. And let's see, I'm just gonna, if Robbie, were there any questions in your queue there from anybody that we haven't answered or anything like that yet? I've also opened up the mic to, in case if you don't want to type in your question, if you have any questions, feel free to just ask us directly here.
Yeah, so one of the questions that came in over the chat window was, does Content Sentry capture all access points into Content Server? So, during the demo, I'll answer that one. So during the demo, Ivan was using Content Server, and all of his access points obviously were through the web user interface. But we do capture, if you were using web services or REST calls or any other APIs, that data will be captured. So it's not just through the web interface. So anything, any request handler or audit event that occurs in the system, we'll be able to capture those. The second question that came in is monitoring of activity in real time? And to answer that, it's not real time, but it's near real time. When an activity happens in the system, there's an agent that runs basically every 5 seconds, and it'll capture that information and store it in the database, and then it'll trigger the agents to run. So you're going to get a 5 to 10 second delay in the with Content Sentry, but it's not real time, but it's as close to real time as we can get. There's a third question about the impact on Content Server, so if there's a performance impact. And Ivan, did you want to answer the performance impact on Content Server? Okay, Ivan is probably not available, but I'll go ahead and...
Sorry, I had a double mute on myself. Yeah, I was just saying that in terms of performance, our agent on a daily basis actually creates essentially a summary of all the activity that happens in the system during that day, and it aggregates into a special table to kind of make our calculations more efficient so that our tables don't grow endlessly. That kind of process allows us to keep Content Sentry more robust and not, take up a lot of database resources or processing resources, so that we keep our tables light and we don't interrupt any of Content Server's processes. We tie into them, but we do it in like a light way that sort of doesn't interrupt the flow. I don't know, Robbie, if you want to add any more to that.
Yeah, no, that's a good answer, Ivan. So basically, we do a lot of aggregation overnight. So the agents run, you can choose the time they run, but they run at midnight usually. out of the box, and they aggregate a lot of the data so that when we perform the counts and so on, all the data is aggregated on a daily basis overnight. So we use off hours to calculate a lot of that information. So during the day, basically, we're just recording the event data on a, as the events happen, we're storing them in a database, but a lot of the calculations and the heavy lifting is done overnight. So Vijay, that's it for the questions. I'll hand it back to you to finalize the presentation.
Okay, thank you, Robbie. And if there are no more questions, what we'd like to do is to thank you for attending, and we'll follow up with an email with a link to download the presentation as well as the recording. And if you have any other questions that come up, there's my email there and telephone number, so feel free to reach out or reach out directly through our website. But thank you for attending, and we'll be following up. Goodbye. Bye-bye.